it's here and it's now. Just move every bolt. Make cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Toward a Quality of Life. Coming to you here late in the month of July, the year 2014. This is not a happy time. This is a sad lecture I'm going to be giving to you because in spite of your busy lives, in spite of whatever you're involved in spite of what you do and don't follow about the state of affairs in our country and around the world, which is affecting each and every one of our lives and will slowly come to bite us ever more severely as time moves on. So it is serious and it is important to attend. But it's sad because we are really in a pickle, we are really adrift, and we're really in trouble in this United States of America as I talk to you today. Now, I have given lectures on the state of our government, in particular on the state of the person who is President of the United States. I have given you lectures about this since the day the President ever became an item on the scene to be known to run for President. And I've questioned who he is, what really is his background, what really are his motives. I talked about stealth revolution long ago, 5-6 years ago, stealth revolution. Unfortunately, all the things that have been spoken about are slowly coming to pass. Also about the narcissistic personality disorder that the president is captive to. Has captured his personality or is his personality. So this is very sad because these realities, unlike the realities of the president, which don't seem to match reality, these realities are coming true. And I've done these lectures as, I hope, a measure for history, not just for us right now, but there may be other persons chronicling all the minutiae, and I don't even have all of it. There's so much to follow. It's quite complex, and it's quite convoluted, and it's quite untransparent, which leads me to something I'm going to talk about later, projection being that the president projects onto others what he's guilty of himself and extols in himself what really is the opposite. And so when I bring up the word transparency, you know that that was one of the key things that he talked about being if he were president. And he is so untransparent that there's near a person that won't admit that. You can't. He's gone deeper and deeper into secluding himself away from anyone being able to get any information, document any information, or be up close and up front, except for what he's got established as this tight little situation around him, very removed from reality. Now, excuse me, I began this lecture with a couple of paragraphs from a person named Thomas Frank writing for Salon, which is notoriously left-leaning, progressive-leaning. Joan Walsh, some of you may know, is a very big factor at Salon magazine, for example, the writer and proponent of progressive causes, as is this person. And so many persons, not only from the right, not only from the middle, but also now more from the left, are starting to throw in the towel and see things a little less rosy than they had before about this president, still defending him, still wanting the few fringe things that he does to satiate their demands, but nonetheless not at all the same as they felt about him before. And So, Thomas Frank writes about the museum that will be built, I don't know if it's underway already, for the president, as all presidents get libraries, museums about their history, especially when in office. And he says in this article, in regards to the library and the presidency, that his presidency, the presidency of Barack Obama, has been ineffective and gutless, a failure. And he says, tongue-in-cheek, why the visitors to his library will wonder, did the president do so little about rising inequality, the subject on which he gave so many rousing speeches? Why did he do nothing or next to nothing about the crazy high price of college education, the great good thing that he has said time and again determines our personal as well as national success? Why didn't he propose a proper health care program instead of the confusing jumble we got? Why not a proper stimulus package that was squandering so much of our money when he came in and did nothing for the inner cities where it was so wanting and such a wide open pathway and mandate for it to happen? Why didn't, those were my ad-libs to this, why didn't he break up the banks that are doing just fine and soaring as our wealthy persons like never before? Or the agribusiness giants for that matter? Or what about housing, which is in a real slump despite the supposed programs he had to help people out of their situations? The next paragraph says, and that was my ad-lib too, the next paragraph says, well, duh, his museum will answer. He couldn't do any of those things because of the crazy right-wingers running wild in the land. He couldn't reason with them. Their brains don't work like ours. He couldn't defeat them at the polls. They gerrymandered so many states that they couldn't be dislodged. What can a high-minded man of principle do when confronted with such a vast span of bigotry and closed-mindedness? The answer towards which the Obama Museum will steer the visitor is nothing. And he suggests that perhaps the pathways in the museums would best be organized as blind alleys. This is the president who fornicated the United States of America. This is a kind of Benedict Arnold. This is a president who should resign. This is a president who is un-American by any value we know, and that doesn't mean white middle-class prejudice. That means freedom, liberty, the right to know your government, and the right that your government serves you, that you do not serve the government. You are not at their disposal to control you. This is a president who lacks logic. I remember when the stimulus bill was passed, very early on in the first year, they just rammed that through, gave the money to all their friends, those businesses went bust. How he abused our treasury. And I remember they had a program in there for solar panels, that was his favorite thing. And the program was only gang members, only criminal records, only people in trouble with the law could benefit. If you were a good student and followed the rules and so forth, that wasn't for you. And this was to install the solar panels to people's homes or energy efficiency. Who's going to let a gang member into his or her home to do that stuff? And why wouldn't the good students be the deserving ones for the money, for the grants? This is a president who is shallow. He may have some vocabulary. He may be able to have a wall around him where he knows how to deflect what's coming at him and never have to answer it. But his thinking and his knowledge is very shallow. Except for his viral dedication, infection of leftist mentality of wanting people to pay, of retribution, of a kind of nastiness. This is a president who hasn't very much common sense. If he did, he wouldn't be squandering the United States of America. Of course, common sense could be qualified by emotional prejudice towards it. Now, while he's not very deep philosophically, remember when he was asked about abortion before he even won the presidency, when he was a big candidate, he was already one of two candidates. They asked him, he was so pro-abortion in Illinois, saying that a full-grown baby born, which really happened, what to do with it? Call it a fetus, meaning it would die, it would be killed. And when asked, well, what's his philosophical opinion? He says, that's above my pay grade, was his answer to that. But abortion, he wants it everywhere. But one thing he does know, and this perplexes me, he certainly knows TV shows. How does a president have time to be watching TV shows? I remember previous presidents didn't know so many things. They would be funny. It would be in the press, like they didn't know about scanning in a grocery line or how to work some gadget or whatever. But this president, I don't know about now, but a couple of years ago, boy, he could tell every line, every point in certain TV shows. Wow! Wow! Because people are talking about how he's not taking care of business. But he certainly knows TV shows. And he certainly knows sports. I mean, I don't know how much he knows, but he's certainly involved in it, and I think there's something may still be, that every weekend he gives his picks about it or whatever. Wow. Okay. So he's the teleprompter, and when he reads from that teleprompter, oh my God, you can feel, I guess, people feel, oh my God. You would think he really believed this stuff and wasn't just doing a kind of stealth, underhanded transformation. This transformation he promised to make before he became president. And his wife made speeches saying the United States will never be the same and nobody will not be working. You're going to be working all right at this rate. You're going to be working more hours for less pay for more years of your life and if not, becoming increasingly destitute either way. So he's got this teleprompter and he can't discuss anything really off the cuff. You can't really just spontaneously get him to talk. And even Democrats have noted that he is, quote, bizarre and detached. And he does suffer a narcissistic personality disorder and perhaps other kinds of personality disorder. I've talked about this in the past. And even Senator Feinstein, who's extremely high, if the highest it goes in the Democratic Party, came out the other day, 2 days ago, saying he needs to be paying attention to what's going on with these situations we're having. He needs to be addressing them while he's been out, as everybody's saying, flying around, giving these speeches. So I saw him, I happened to see him one day, the day the Malaysian plane went down in Ukraine, where people not involved in that war were killed, okay, by supposedly the rebels shooting the plane down, supposedly. And he had to read, he was giving one of these speeches every day. He's flying like it's unreality, more detached than ever. What happens when the stuff hits the fan and it's crowding in on you and it's growing and growing? Paralysis and more detachment and more unreality. So this news came right in front of him, stirring the crowd. And he's reading, he had to read the 4 lines or whatever it was from a teleprompter. And it was really sad. He was under great stress and he had to now give the emotion for that. And he's reading this simple thing instead of just saying, you know, a plane was down, we're going to have to see what happens. And I watched him. It was so hard for him. He was trying, and he says, it looks like it might be a terrible tragedy. And then he goes, hey, how are you, everybody out there like this, blah, 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 and doing his pre-programmed way. And even his fans that were helping him, some, quote, celebrities, etc., said, wow, that was weird. Another thing about our president, he's not for all the people, needless to say, okay? He's only for the ones that want what he wants. And this means all kinds of sexual orientation, all kinds of abortion, all kinds of non-religion, all kinds of pro-Muslim, pro-whatever, kind of like give the stimulus money to the criminals, but don't give it to the good people. I'm not saying that, don't get me wrong, I'm not equating one with criminals, but making the analogy, it's sort of like, remember in the beginning people were saying, gee, every country that's our enemy is his friend, everyone that's our friend is his enemy. In other words, he chose to be enemies. He didn't like the ones that were our friends, but he likes the ones that don't like us. And that's something that's been creeping up to people realizing, geez, he doesn't like this country too much. No kidding. And his background, so much hidden. And you know what? It's the people's fault too, because nobody would look. They thought, how awful that you would say these things about him. And it's so true, he has very curious hidden background that doesn't add up. But nobody except the few that did would go and see and check if there's anything to what they were saying. And when everything is hidden, and boy is it hidden, and then that's what everybody's saying. They can't get documents, they can't get information. The journalists might go on strike. They can't be at any events. They're blocked out of things. When Michelle Obama went to China, nobody was allowed to be following her, and yet she visited with state people in China and everything. Everything is hidden. And guess what somebody told me, separate from this topic? That when something is hidden, it's because there's something to hide. So here's this president, transparent, you know, they still say that. Lies, lies, lies is also his thing. And they still say that he's very transparent. They stand there and say that. Okay, 38 news organizations just wrote a letter to him about how it's really crippling to our democracy and information, how he's not letting them cover what they have to cover. So about the lies, President Obama lies, lies, lies. Lies is his way. And Nixon has nothing on him as far as devious behavior. I've said it before. It's not new that I'm saying it now, but I said this is a Nixonian president. It's in Mr. Obama's DNA to lie. In fact, a lot of things, the things he calls narrative, you know, he believes in having to present people a narrative. The lies are often not only made up when this proverbial stuff hits the fan, they're made up in advance. The lies, and then some kind of carpet with the narrative is spread out before your eyes.
This is part 2 of a multi-part series on psychiatric issues, anti-freedom communistic policy, and destructivism of President 44.
And I said, he's nasty. Just the other day, a guy called him Antichrist, you know, threw that at him at some event. And his comment to that was, I met that guy. He needs to update his material. That has a very blah, blah, you tone to it. He has said to Hispanic audiences in the past, punish your enemies. And Gutierrez said something to that effect just the other day, too. And ridiculing. He he really specializes in ridiculing, labeling, belittling. And as I've pointed out to you in the past, he's had people before him at States of the Union, even ones that he's invited there, high officials, so to speak, and they get a guest spot right in the front, and he ridicules them and humiliates them in front of the world as they sit there, after he's invited them to sit in that spot. And he speaks to the middle class. He speaks to, you know, this is the thing, speaks to women, he speaks to the middle class. All of these things converge also around someone whose name I've mentioned many times in my lecture, Saul Alinsky, who dedicated his book to Lucifer. And those of you who follow the Bible, don't take this literally by Saul Alinsky that he meant like a devil versus God and so forth, but it's sort of like what Jagger would say, that every cop is a criminal and every cop is a criminal and every criminal is a saint. So, something like that in one of his. So he's meaning it sort of like upside down, and he dedicates the book to Lucifer, how to conduct a stealth revolution, where you do it you do it right in front of people's eyes, but they don't know that it's being done. And as I've told you, the president has studied at that institute. There's a picture of him at U of Chicago teaching Saul Alinsky principles on the blackboard. So one of the things, many of these things, ridiculing, speak to middle class, you know, are very much prescriptions of Saul Alinsky on how to go about things. And I'd like to say that the president is a very damaged person. I believe this is a guesstimate. It's a conjecture. I'm not saying it for a fact. A very damaged child in this disorder that he has. You know, I know people have very bad backgrounds. They live with parents who are, or a mother who is into drugs, or everybody around them is in. That's very horrible. They pretty much are on their own. They've seen terrible things, but there's a kind of sensitivity and particularness to the dynamics of how things went for Mr. Obama, to the most we can tell, because we really know virtually nothing about him. And usually we know everything about our presidents, and we have a right to know everything about our presidents. When they were born, when they died, who they dated, where they lived, what they said. We usually know everything. But he suffered, of course, you know, this wild father who came into his life once, and who knows what effects, and the other father in Indonesia, but then he was sent home, back to his grandparents. He was with his mother, then he was thrown back. This had to be horrible. And then he was in the school in, he has detachment. No wonder he's detached. And then he was in the school, in the prestigious school in Hawaii where his grandparents lived, and everybody, I would assume, was quite wealthy, so he'd be out of place. That would give you this class thing too, you know, that would, and with all the other dynamics, he used to tell kids, I read that his father was a prince in Africa. It's very easy to understand. He had an awful lot, and I remember reading in a book written about his mother, I read an excerpt of it, was walking with her friend in Indonesia, and Obama was, he was called Barry. I don't know if he was called Barry at that time, but up until he ran for president, he was always referred to in Chicago as Barry. So anyway, he's walking along, and some kids are throwing stones at him. Even in Indonesia, he had troubles, okay? Even in Indonesia. And they were throwing stones, and he's walking along like he didn't see it, he didn't care. And the lady says to the mother, oh, geez, look at that. And the mother said, that's okay, that's how he handles it. So, he has issues with abandonment, being detached, being, you know, being put through these very wild kind of things, being black in a white context, being relatively not well off, I would assume, in a context of people that were really well off, etc. And his vision is not so much a black vision. Woe to the people who are black in the United States of America. His vision is a class vision, if you can call what he has a vision, and I suppose you could. Okay, he has used the country like a tissue to blow his nose in and do whatever else with that tissue. He has used this country for. He seems to be part of sort of the world communist movement. And we didn't know they're still around. They're so quiet. They're not going to come and announce to you, hey, we're taking over. Or, hey, this is how you're going to live from now on. We're going to control. No. Stealth, stealth. How many lectures did I give about stealth? And speak to you and your middle class values. Remember his comment about religion and guns? You know those people with the Bible and their guns saying they were bitter? Well, he's certainly been after religion. Not the Muslim religion. That's the one to protect. But the Christian religion, saying nothing about the way Christians are literally being wiped out in many countries of the Middle East right now, beheaded, forced to join Islam or pay heavy tax or die. And in Africa, too, not just the Middle East. He's been brutal to the Catholic Church. He's been brutal to Christianity. There are times people in the service can't have a Bible, but the Quran is okay, and so forth. He certainly wants to remove guns, and when guns are removed, then only the police and the government, which are becoming one and the same because of such militarizing police departments, when only one faction has the guns, good luck. And he maligns and he blames, and he's not working for you. He's working for... I rest my case with the border situation right now. I rest my case. He's not working for the United States of America that we know and we love, including people who are African American. Yes, many have many qualifications, and rightly so. But you can't tell me that deep in their hearts, especially where we're going and where we've come, and we're coming and we keep on coming, that all people, especially ones who have such bad situation regarding freedom, would not want to be and prosper in a free country where opportunities are there for them to do what they can, which is what the classic United States of America is supposed to stand for. Are we guilty of sins? You betcha. Are we guilty of sins relatively as bad and wicked as many other places that we know of in the world? You bet not. This is a very imperfect world, and as human history goes, we've been working it out quite well, though it's been hard. But nothing in comparison to countries whose names I don't even need to name, which is why people want to come here away from so many countries in the world. He's kind of mean. He can be mean, and he is ruthless. Oh, he's ruthless. As we go on, you'll see more. He's ruthless, all right. But, you know, think of the children at the border and, you know, getting raped, and they're sleep deprived, I was reading, and the food is bad that they're getting, and, you know, they're alone, they're terrified, there's sex trafficking going on big time. I mean, and letting them just come and not, just if he took the money and gave them a plane ticket and gave them each $1,000 or $2,000, it would be way cheaper than what he has in mind. And why is he letting things go? And imagine what they could do with $1,000 and $2,000 in their own country. It would still be cheaper. And guess what? The least among us are asking, what about us? Sitting on the street, sitting in nursing homes, sitting anywhere. with nowhere to go and nowhere to be. Sequestration. Remember, he tried to say that the Republicans made it, and I'm no fan of the Republicans, but I'm certainly no fan of the Democrats. He tried to, and that's when they had to cut back on some services, so they made it especially hard. They made it hard for vets to get to their monument on the day, whatever holiday they observed there in Washington. They all came 90-year-old from World War II. They had it roped off. They broke the ropes and got to, do their reason for being there. And then the government tied it up again the following day. They prevented people from viewing Mount Rushmore. Even like from the highway, they made it so that even if you couldn't get where you're supposed to look at it, they made it impossible for you to see it from the road by putting cones and stuff. They made senior citizens leave their homes that were in government land, probably leased for their homes to be there. They put them out of their homes during sequestration, etc., etc. The people who had to handle it said they were told to make it as hard as possible on people. How about when the kids, when he first became president, who were in charter schools in D.C., got a grant from the Congress to go to charter schools and were doing really well. And he was saying, no, everybody's got to go back to public schools in D.C., and they were begging him to leave them there to finish their high school. And he said, no. I don't know how that turns out in the end, but I know that was an ongoing thing. He has it in for people, and he certainly wants to control not only the United States, but the world. And my opinion is he doesn't belong in any office that has any effect on people, and also that what background does he have to do anything? He doesn't. And as far as the African American population goes, boy, many persons didn't like Herman Cain, who really did do things that took him busting his nuts to do it really well, like he did, and climb the ladder. But they didn't like him. They don't like, Ben Carson, is it? The head of the head of pediatric surgery at Johns Hopkins. How much more achieved? He can't be digging in little kids' brains without being extraordinarily achieved, let alone the head of the department. But no, they don't like him. He likes the Bible. He likes a disciplined life. He likes people to get themselves together and move ahead and have some discipline in their life. No. And Herman Cain, not that either one of them would make a good president, but from African American persons, they didn't like them. And Herman Cain had a very joyful disposition. You see, this president has a morose disposition, and the country is feeling depressed somewhat from it. Herman Cain, actually, I remember some of his advancements were some corporation he worked for that did fast food service, I believe. He instituted that people would be greeted with a smile. He is totally like an up. Come on, people, let's get up. And the thing about communists, and that's not what they're called today, perhaps progressives, not all would be exactly communists, socialists, whatever, means to the end. Now, people who are not of this persuasion also practice means to the end, that any means to the end is okay. But it's particularly severe in these circumstances, that whatever it takes to get to where you're going is fine. Like when the healthcare came in, and if you want to call it that, and 5 million people automatically lost, and many more millions would have if the president on his own didn't change the law, as he does all the time. But 5 million, they said, what's the problem? People like yourself out there listening who have a budget, whose budget is exactly what they take in. Where's this much for health care, this much for rent, this much for mortgage. And then you go and you blow that away. And you say, what the hell? Who cares? Pathology, personality disorder, narcissism, unreality. The reality he obeys is his own. When the first year in office, I've told you this before, he was working on a nuclear treaty all the time. We had the banks had collapsed, everything, the market had collapsed, people were freaking out, their homes were foreclosing, etc. It was horrible. And nothing was being done about that. The silly things he pulls out. He had a meeting at the White House about concussions in sports, about, people say, what? These kinds of needs are happening, even equality of women and abortion. What is all this stuff about? And sexual orientation. When people need jobs, when people's incomes, even if they do work, are going down, when food is going up, when rent is going up, when college and education is getting beyond, when people's lives are so strapped. What the heck? And he does what suits him. And now he's doing what suits him, and even his own party is saying, hey, get back here. And, I used to say, why doesn't he stay home, roll up his sleeves, and get into understanding some of these things? And knowing what, and working with the Congress. How do you think things get done in a democracy, in one that's not a dictator, not one ruler telling you, take this and shut your mouth because this is all you're going to get. It's, this is what I'm telling you you've got to do. No, you work through compromise. And when you do compromise, you get some things you don't want. And the people you're compromising with get some things they don't want. That's how our system, if it's still there, works. You have to get down and dirty and perspire with the people and struggle through, and you've got to keep applying effort. People are willing to talk if you're willing to let them talk and put their 2 cents in and get something for themselves as well. He said right off the bat about compromise, and when people came to him with ideas that were not ones he would want, he says, I won. You can just picture it. And Pelosi echoed him. She said, we won. Oh. That beautiful Roman Catholic Nancy Pelosi.
This is part 3 of a multi-part series on psychiatric issues, anti-freedom communistic policy, and destructivism of President 44. We enter a lecture in progress.
And then last year, when was it, a budget? I forgot what it was. There's so many things. He's walking around saying, I won't negotiate. I won't negotiate. Well, what the heck? If you won't negotiate, who's going to talk with you? Who's going to work with you? And Democrats have said that he hasn't a clue how to talk to people. That could be. So some of this, especially now when the pressure is really getting severe on him, some of it I would think, how does a narcissist block out that he's not the greatest, that the world doesn't genuflect before him, that they don't give him a Nobel Peace Prize without ever having lifted a finger just for being alive? And by the way, what makes people so drawn to him, even now, he has people that swear by him. I'm not, but let me say this. There's a sucker for that can be born any minute. In other words, I am susceptible to be a sucker for somebody just as people follow this guy. It can happen to anybody. But it happened on a mass scale. In psychiatry, we have a thing called folie à deux, where a person who's not quite all there influences a mate or a person close to him who sticks with him, influences him, and so the follies that he believes in his mind become shared by the other. And I would call this a folie aux millions, because millions is hook, line, and sinker. Okay, so reality is not exactly his strong point, except when the reality is the one in his head. And, it's been said that he's bored, that he's so bright that he's bored. Well, he's not only bored, he's not able. He's in a freeze. Someone has referred to him as being in a paralysis recently of being able to do stuff. Whatever he is, bored, I doubt it's bored because he's not getting in and doing the job that he was hired to do. Being a president, being a governor is a horribly difficult job. You think it's fun? You think it's all about cameras flashing? Really doing those jobs well is horrible. It requires exhaustion of getting into the thicket, getting into the weeds of all the problems that a president, even a governor, has to handle. And he's not doing his job. And so he's bored because this ain't his thing. This ain't his thing. His thing is teleprompter, speeches, and getting more and more people under his thumb, or the thumb of the controllers. And he's very good at destruction. Oh boy, what isn't being destroyed in this country? He's removed generals. He's removed programs in NASA. He's removed the storage facility for nuclear waste. He's turned school system upside down with this Common Core. Talk about kids that don't have adequate education to begin with, and now you throw this at them on top of it. On and on it goes. Flying around, reading his teleprompter. How you doing out there, California? San Francisco, how you doing out there? And always his celebrity friends, whom I'd suggest would do well to take in a few hundred of these children at the border. And Pelosi, too, in their McMansions. They could set up dormitories. You know, he actually said, to show you his feeling about this and boredom, and this ain't what he's about, he actually said, somebody asked him where he was going to live after the presidency. He said, and he told him, I forgot what he told him, but he says, I'll be living there when I'm done with this president thing. That's how he referred to it. When I'm done with this president thing, he said. He had, I remember one time, Jay-Z and his posse. I think Beyonce might have been in that group. She wasn't so famous back then. In the Situation Room, the most sacred room of the White House. He had them sitting there. The photo, you could see the photo on the internet. This president thing. Trickster, and he's quite thuggish. Oh, he's quite thuggish. Many people have talked about the pressure, and he's got so many news outlets, newspapers, news media, except for Fox and so forth, on his side. They're getting a little away out of the herd right now. It's getting a little looser, somewhat, but boy, does he come down on people. Everything right away, pressure. And he threatens them. And many people have spoken up about it, and you can get worse off for speaking up about it. Okay, so if you're not the non-negotiator, if you don't want his way, which is a one rule, everybody under the thumb, if you don't want his way, you are an enemy. Like the Tea Party, which is not his enemy. They're just like most of you listening to me right out there, believe it or not. They go to work every day, they can barely afford what they're paying for, and they just want to make things easier and economically more sensible, better schools, blah, 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 all the things you hear about, lower taxes, all that stuff, the same stuff you would like to have happen in your life, if you're not already the Tea Party. And he did a great job of ridiculing and maligning them and making them into, they like to use the word crazy about them. Crazy? Who's crazy? He has betrayed the country. I remember that when he in one of the books, which I haven't read, but I've seen excerpts, and there was one when he got this first job, very brief. He not really had no jobs. Well, he was a lecturer, not a professor, at the University of Chicago, but that would mean some part-time teaching. He was that for 8 years or something, I don't know. But anyway, he says in this book, one of them, Dreams for My Father, whatever, he says, when he had this job, he was sitting behind the computer, and he said, here he was, behind enemy lines. That's how he referred to it. Being there was being behind enemy lines. In other words, corporate America as the enemy, or America as the enemy. And I'm not into corporations. Oh my goodness, I am not. But I would never see them as enemies. He swore that he would uphold the Constitution. And the Constitution calls for 3 equal branches that each have to do their part. You don't cross them. You know, you don't do each other's parts. And the Constitution says whatever the federal government, whatever is not listed as a federal prerogative is left to the states. And he does not like that. In fact, he did say in 2001 that that's a gripe he has with the Constitution, but he did swear to uphold the Constitution. I'm not going to get into Benghazi, but I'll just point to this, that the State Department had live video for the 7 to 8 hours that attack was running. Right in Washington, they were watching it live. I'll just say that, as people were left to burn and die in this mysterious situation of what they were even doing there. And some military people have said they weren't even aware that this was happening, while the State Department had live video feed of it. But he has betrayed the country with this Benghazi. It's an awful story. And they're trying to make light of it, but the real story is very awful. And the IRS, which leads to Washington, and it stopped. It's a huge wall, no documents, no people refusing to testify. It got closer and closer, IRS. The 5 terrorists that were released into Qatar. And Qatar is a country that is implicated in heavy funding of all these extremist, so to speak, groups that are in the Middle East now doing their thing. And it's said to have a good relationship with the president, and that's where those terrorists were sent. How about that? Just to show you that he has betrayed the country. I could go on, but we're just passing it. It's a stealth revolution, ladies and gentlemen. The revolution will not be televised. And making the country more of a mess is part of the Alinsky way. You make it more of a mess. The border, you make it more of a mess. Healthcare. It may seem to some people, oh great, wait. Much higher prices, much higher deductible, much fewer services, much fewer time spent with a physician, if at all. Much longer waits. Much less things paid for by the so-called insurers. You ain't seen nothing yet. And a program whose costs will collapse the system alone. And having exemptions, having it not count whether you already have an illness, and having insurance till you're 26 with your parents could have been done in a little bill. You don't need all of this when people bring up that this is, And the people who don't have insurance could have been invited to Medicaid. The program could have been made for them. It's already out there, etc. Or we could have gone into a total Medicare system that really was sensibly crafted, which this was not. Remember the way it was being made? All kinds of bribes being given to the people to vote for it. And by the way, it never had one Republican vote in the end. It was all Democrat. It was a mess of a bill. And since then it zigged and zagged, and he's just changed it at will, which is not his prerogative, and even the Supreme Court has come down and said, you're working outside the Constitution. Oh, I'm sure he knows that much. He doesn't only not like our country, I believe he just has it in for people Period. Period. And in some, he's kind of, you know, it's hard to believe because he seems so well-spoken to so many people that he's a mentally imbalanced, kind of a nut job who makes things up. And he certainly has a very grandiose sense of himself. And some people have suggested, and there's an element of that doing all these fundraisers and these, you know, group things day after day, night after night, while the world is going to hell in a handbasket, serves his need to be adored, to be, you know, to be raised, to be the greatest. And just to show you, after that attack in Kenya, in Nairobi, I believe it was,
Al-Shabaab,
who captured a mall, and how many people died in that? And they seized it, and it was in hostage and killing terms for a few days, I believe, if I recall.
and then following the severe atrocities of ISIS in Iraq,
He said to some reporters that that group
ISIS
was just JV, i.e. JV, like on versus the real players on a sports team. Imagine him, because I got Bin Laden, but Boko Haram that tortured little children. I can't begin to tell you the things I read they were doing even to the little children before they killed them inside that mall.
and ISIS, which was beheading children and crucifying people.
That was just JV. Because and when he talked about that he got Bin Laden, everybody noticed that the thing was not that the SEALs went in and did their thing like only they know how to do, and they have a different account of how it went down, many of them. But his whole thing was, I did this, I did that. What he did is he waited in Washington with probably biting his nails while he watched it on the screen. When the Gulf of Mexico happened, his response to that was, plug the damn hole. Does that show you the unreality inside this head? Plug the damn hole? Can you get the sense of that? And just the other day, his people and he put out that the world is less violent now more than ever in any time in history, i.e. like sort of due to Obama being on the scene. I let you. How about his narrative that he wanted you to believe after I killed Bin Laden? And anyway, can you imagine him in a fatigue with Kalesh, what are those called, those rifles? Can you imagine him jumping out of a boat and doing something like that? He had you believe that Al-Qaeda's dead, terrorism, for the world, for history, forever to know, I stopped it. I, Barack Obama. And one of the stalwart progressive types in the Democratic side, Ron Fournier, wrote an article recently, called it, It's Not About You, Mr. President. And the point he makes, it's about the people and what we want. And now he's going around whining, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I can't this. The president's not supposed to do that. He's supposed to hear you, including the ones that don't like what he's doing. And we're supposed to give a little for him, a little for the other people, a little for the middle, a little for this one. That's how it goes.
This is part 4 of a multi-part series on psychiatric issues, anti-freedom communistic policy, and destructivism of President 44. We enter a lecture in progress.
And we won't even get on today what he should have, could have, would have done for the African American community that I would say has taken many steps downward in their opportunities and pathways. In other words, their lives have become harder instead of easier. The end justifies the means. Whatever Whatever means to get there, do it. Deception as a way of life. He doesn't have his driver's license from the state of Connecticut. He's never lived there. They say that's impossible. You can't have a Connecticut license. The birth thing, the certificate, the promo booklet in Harvard for his first book that said born in Kenya right on the front cover. His academics, probably a lot of incompletes. They made a point of signing him up for health care when that whole health care problem signing up was going on. He couldn't sign up. It came back as fraud with his Social Security number. His aides had to go and do something about it. So he and his wife think that they have dibs on your life and on my life. And I say, hey, you, get off my cloud, don't hang around, two's a crowd. And he's a killing machine. I don't know if he's still sending those drones. He used to sit down, choose who to kill, and said, I'm great at killing. That's a quote from a book done by one of his loving acolytes. He's got, do you understand that he has done an awful lot of expansion of U.S. military into countries in Africa? Extremely so. And you've got to look at which countries, which religions, of which there are many Muslim-dominated or parts in countries of Africa. And you've got to check that out. Go and investigate more about that. And the drones, and saying it's okay to kill a U.S. citizen, and then Rand Paul did the all-nighter to protest that. Remember, in the Congress? That you cannot, without a warrant, without due process, just go and kill, as he did al-Waki, I believe it was, in Yemen, who was born in the United States, in New Mexico. He also lets everything go, which I've already alluded to, but he let Iraq go. He let I'm saying months went by, and in case you think, oh, that's okay, he's the black president, the military is black and white, and many black persons in the military love this country. I have seen them say without any reservation that they are proud to serve the United States of America. Those situations were just let to slide, and then he just decides, like he said he was going to do, we're getting out with no rhyme or reason of how to do it. So back goes Iraq into worse situation than before, no planning, no ability to come to terms with a treaty, not keeping up with everything. When you come to be president, communist or otherwise, you must deal with what's in front of you, whatever it is, and stop saying, this is what I inherited. No kidding. Every president inherits crap that they put on his desk and tell him about. To be the president is not fun. So he lets these things go. He gets Karzai so upset with him that Karzai won't even talk to him, wouldn't even acknowledge him when he recently made a stop over there, didn't come to meet with him, refused to do compromise for how to wrap it up. Same thing happened in Iraq. And so now, all the good work, all the money, all the protections, many Afghanis want the United States there. They're the only thing keeping the Taliban's hands off of many Afghani people. And what a mess it is. Everything is let go. Everything is let go. The VA, I mean, we can't get sidetracked, but you know how many things are just, oh, it's piling up all over the place. He himself, that is the president, had said once when they asked him, a rare thing that he gives an answer like this, that what is the weakness of him? And he said that he can be lazy. So he's been referred to as the bored, quote, couldn't be bothered president. in his own reality. Just for show, one of his usual things, at one point in his tenure, he made a job council of the big CEOs to come together, meet, and figure out what to do about jobs. Never had the meetings, finally disbanded it. Security briefings, I don't know about now. He actually skipped them many days. Who ever heard of a president not getting security briefings? The Gulf of Mexico, when he waited days and days, plug the damn hole, don't let me. How could that person, not only for the United States, but for the world, not say, oh my God, my ocean, my fish, my food, my people, my cancer, my ruination of the climate by what's going on down there. Let me get down there. Let me roll up my sleeves. Let me get the forces together. Let me get this going. And they asked him when they saw him finally many days into it, you know, reluctantly, have you spoken with the CEO of BP? No. No, he hadn't. Oh my God. This is a guy who's a, quote, green president. That Gulf is still under terrible, terrible condition. It's horrible what's going on there. It's a parking lot, and the fish are dead or dying. They're swimming, the porpoises, everything, half, you know, and with mutations, and oh, it's terrible. No one, you know, the enormity, the gravity was kept. So everybody just goes on their merry way. Healthcare. Oh, what a mess. And I'm for universal healthcare. And a ruination, because we will never have medicine the way we have known it to be. You watch. But you won't watch, because it's a stealth revolution and it creeps into you slowly. Little by little. So much so that you never feel it. The VA. And the IRS, like I said, stopping in Washington, getting that far up to some lawyers in Washington. And we also know that the IRS never goes to the White House, okay? Maybe once in a year, maybe. Okay, there's no reason. They're just doing their thing. The head of the IRS visited the White House 157 times in that year when the problems were happening. What was he doing there? In 2009, when he came in, I told you he's working on anything but the needs of what was going on. We were in that financial meltdown, etc. And the Treasury was unmanned. There was nobody to fill the spots, to give Congress briefings, and all that wasn't being taken care of. The State Department had no people in its positions, and it wasn't till many weeks later, many, that Hillary from across the world, and a pox on Hillary while I mention her name, that Hillary from across the world had to shout out, I need some people. Inattentive and destructive. Oh, destruction he knows, like a kid. He'll take it apart, but you ain't going to see it put back together again. And the question becomes, is that on purpose? Is that by chance? People say incompetence, or is it intentional? Which is it? But sexual orientation, abortion, and having an ID to vote, and I tell you, is it so bad to ask for an ID to vote? You need an ID, whatever you do in life. Fornicating the United States of America. Fornicating the United States of America. And you know something? Under all his duress now, he's kind of pathetic too, I feel. Believe it or not, and it doesn't matter, there's little pinches of sympathy. We had to take a bit of a break here, ladies and gentlemen. We are back now. If there's any disconnect, I apologize, but here we are to continue the lecture. There's been a lot of discussion about the president making laws on his own, which is not a duty or power given to him by our form of government. In our form of government, we have 3 equal branches. We have the executive, which is the president, the legislative, the Congress, and the judicial, which is the courts and the Supreme Court. And 9 times the president's making of laws on his own has been challenged at the Supreme Court already. And each time the court has come back with a unanimous decision. That includes people who are left-leaning on the court, unanimous, that he is overstepping what a president is allowed to do. And let me give you an example, too, of how the Congress should be very important in overseeing what is happening in the country and even what a president does. They have an awful lot of prescribed authority to be handling things that they kind of aren't handling. For example, I saw recently the Nuclear Regulatory Commission having to do, I guess, its intermittent review before the Congress of how things are going with its oversight of our nuclear facilities and so on. And I saw Barbara Boxer, who's a dyed-in-the-wool, left-leaning Democrat, grilling the nuclear regulatory official. I've forgotten if it was the head or not, asking her, was this cleaned up as was told would be the previous time she met with Congress? Was this done? Was this done with? And none of it had been done, not even touched yet, to show you how important it is for the Congress to be in there playing heavily with what's going on in the country and to be overseeing what's going on and to be making the laws. It is not for the president to be making laws on a whim because something doesn't work for him, so he'll make it to suit him. And the decisions he makes in changing things that are not his to change are always to be useful for the time being. There's a term for that, but it's stuff that'll really be bad for us down the road. But if it works politically for him now or helping with an election, he does it. In other words, things that hurt the country and the way it's supposed to work and the way it's supposed to be free and functioning between 3 equal branches. All right, so you know plenty about all the golfing, the partying, the fundraising, the vacations. And by the way, he and Joe Biden bring in $1 million per night bills when they go somewhere. $1 million a night and more. And Joe Biden, too. The costs are incredible. And what about the pollution from that Air Force plane traveling night and day on these trips that get paid for by the taxpayer because even though they're all about fundraising, the president and others before him will go and do some community event of some sort so that it qualifies to be paid for by the taxpayers. And it's been spoken recently a lot, a president that is AWOL, missing in action. Ladies and gentlemen, I repeat to you again, it's a revolution, and the revolution won't be televised, and it's a stealth revolution. And the more we get destroyed, the easier it is for it to happen. This is an oppressive government the way it is now and getting more oppressive. He's tightening, keeping people out, getting more and more secretive. Word crimes, things you can't say, you can be busted. So I just saw go by, I skim things every morning, skim the news, and I saw that in some town or city, I believe in California, some police or somebody heard someone saying something through a window, and they're looking for the person to arrest him because what he said was a word crime, something that you're not supposed to say. I don't know what it was because I didn't read the article. But your freedoms to say what you want, be what you want, do what you want, eat what you want, have the health care that you want. When people tried to get in and see the kids at the border, he didn't allow them. Didn't allow even congressional people until big uproars forced his hand. It didn't allow ICE to speak to anybody. ICE agents are sitting playing card games, probably watching porn. They've been taken off the beat. And they're not allowed to talk. And they're livid. And an intimidator. Oh boy, I've said that already. He's brutal to whistleblowers. The ones that are good, the ones that were happy, they whistle blew because they tell us things we need to know. He's brutal to whistleblowers. And the lady who recently was made chief editor of the New York Times, or chief journalist, whatever that position is called, Jill Abramson, she got fired recently. And you know, the day before she got fired, she publicly in the newspaper criticized his health care. I forgot on what basis, but she criticized that. And prior to that, she made a statement that this is the most untransparent administration she's ever known, having worked with several in her lifetime. And the New York Times is his handmaiden. He just calls them up and they do exactly what they actually change the truth of news. They actually change it. And Huffington Post does that too by just not reporting a lot of things of the news or twisting how they say it to try to make it different than what it just really is in plain vanilla terms. You know, when he was running for president, it came out, it's been admitted by people, that there was a group that communicated by email. They were called the journalists. Ezra Klein, I believe, was one of them. And they would work at how to prevent stuff being found out about Barack Obama. And the New York Times is the classic example of following that to this day. If you don't go to many news sources, I've said this before, you're not going to know some of the real news that's happening, whether you like all of their headlines or not. Because a lot of the things are not getting reported in New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times, probably the Boston Globe, which I don't look at.
This is part 5 of a multi-part series on psychiatric issues, anti-freedom communistic policy, and destructivism of President 44. We enter a lecture in progress.
How about SWAT teams? Oh my goodness, people are being put upon by these SWAT teams, militarized. I saw a militarized vehicle right on Boylston Street the other day. The police are getting all this heavy-duty equipment, the same kind that we've used in Iraq and Afghanistan. And they have all the weapons, all the noise, you know, the stuff that can pierce your eardrums, the lasers, everything against the people. What for? The buildup of militarized police. When this guy who was president came in, or even before I should say, he gave speeches in which he said, we're going to have a domestic security force equal to the military force. And people's raised eyebrows, what the heck for? So we've got these SWAT teams. They're killing dogs. They injured a baby. You know, they threw something, you know, a little bomb type thing in one place, and it hit a baby that was sleeping, and he's got a bad thing on his face. And my friend was telling me she was at someone's home, and this lady told her they were having a party in her home, just in a town somewhere, and some neighbors called it they were too loud, and a SWAT team descended on the place because they were called out for having too loud of a party. A private plane was talking about one day a SWAT team descended on them. Just even if they're looking for something, a lot of times they're wrong, but they're looking like for credit card fraud or whatever. The SWAT team comes in, they bust open the door. Every day I'm reading they kill dogs every day. You know, the dogs barking, dead. And then I read the other day that DHS with its military vehicles and, you know, they are dressed in their, you know, thug boot, jackbooted types of outfits are in some town just sitting around there. And people ask, well, what is this for? He said, just to let you know we're here. The government is not your friend. The government is your oppressor. Liberty and the experiment of the United States of America, which is very young, is most unusual, most special. People don't have liberty. And here, people are dying to give up their liberty. People are giving it away without a whisper, without a whimper. Do you think this border situation is not giving up your liberty? Do you know that there have been prayer rugs and Qurans found on the border recently? Of course terrorists are coming in. Common sense. Chemical weapons, biological weapons. Oh, people are asleep. I guess it's mostly the people's fault. But like I said, there's a sucker somewhere for somebody, including myself, can be a sucker. There's somebody that can succor you anywhere, anytime in this world. Nobody's immune. And in our schools, Common Core, we won't get into it. Turn the school system up. What a mess. What a mess. But sex for kids, oh boy, that's in there. Fisting is in there, if you don't know what that is. Has been in one or more schools. The stuff, that's in there. And this president is like a dictator who hurts his people. He is hurting his people. Like I said, we could be way more benevolent giving those children, letting everybody know, forget it. And you know this happened because he said, loud and clear, that if you're under a certain age and you're here, you're going to be allowed to stay. And then the coyotes, so to speak, as they're called, the smugglers and all the traffickers, they took that and they ran with it. And they're getting huge bucks from the people. And many kids lost their limbs on the trek, on the train that comes up here. Oh boy. There's been a few dead bodies found, etc., etc. And they're in terrible condition now. And I heard, too, they were going into homes and that there wasn't really a chance to check out who they were going with. That one state was going to pay $6,000 a month to have you take a kid. I don't know if that's so, but... You expect a president to root for the home team. You expect a president to represent you proudly. He represents himself proudly. I'm here. Me. A president works for the people. The president puts himself at the service and dignity and exaltation of the nation. And he presents it in the best possible light to the world. And like I said before, he's joyless. So he's definitely affecting the country's mood. And morale. How do you think our veterans, and many are black, they are not only white, feel to see Iraq go up in not only flames, but horrid flames, beheadings? I skimmed by again today. I saw that there was, I didn't see the picture, but there was one of these head guys that leads groups like ISIS, these caliphate-oriented so-called extremists that are taking over these countries, that we were trying to do something with, which is a whole other subject, I know, but nonetheless. And I saw that there's supposedly a photo of him with sort of a half-eaten grin on his face, holding a bucket of human heads. And so Iraq is in dire straits, and in fact, this group controls a huge part of Iraq already. Syria's burning, everything's burning. Gaza's burning. It's awful. It's awful. And how do you think veterans feel without legs, like this, with their faces burned, with brain damage, you know, all over, you know, and walking and trying to do stuff? How many thousands of them are out there that gave their lives? How do they feel to see everything they suffered for and believed in, and many of them did, black and white? How do you think they feel to see this now? Is that not the biggest kick in the you-know-what? And how do you think we feel when we see ISIS, this group that's taken over huge swaths of Iraq, laughing, sending a tweet to Michelle Obama, ha ha ha, we got this, with our Humvees and all our equipment driving away with their flags on it, you know, ha ha ha. And how do the veterans sitting in the VA feel about this commander-in-chief, who ran on the thing he knew how bad it was at the VA when he was running for president to begin with, and swore that this was the thing he was going to fix? And the kind of mentality that permeates the administration, I'll add here. Susan Rice, who came and on the TVs and said, you know, that the Benghazi was just, you know, about a video, and everybody found out that was a lie. And then she did another lie. I forgot what it was about. You know, she came on and did the shows again. But I want to point out that she was having an interview, a serious one, with a person who was being nice to her and asked her about something. And I forgot what position. She's high up. I forgot her position now. It's been changed. But anyway, they asked her a serious question in a nice way, and she goes, "Dang if I know," was her answer. Then there was the White House aide who came on to one of the shows, and they asked him something. It was about Benghazi. He goes, "Dude, that was 2 years ago." Then there was, like I said before, the president himself, that when he's through with this president thing, then when the 5 terrorists, and I'll leave it up to you to decide what Obama is for releasing those guys that even the Pentagon said they did reviews of who could go. His own people said they were part of 48 that cannot be let loose, and they came from that group, okay? And when the military, everybody objected that had anything to do with it. And he did it on his own again. When the military was objecting, his people said, "Suck it up and salute." Do you get my drift? And then the other day, they have these weirdos at the State Department that I've been women, young, that I wondered about, a couple of them. Like, whoa, what are they doing in those positions? They were there when Hillary was there, too. And the other day, when the Malaysia plane went down, they went to the State Department. She talked about, she gave a little briefing and knew about the plane. She talked about everything but the plane. That's how she came on at first with her stuff. And then immediately after that, she was tweeting about fashion. This president has squandered our money, making us poor. It was our gross overall debt was $5 trillion before he became president. It's now $13 trillion. Those are numbers that can't even be grasped in what they mean. He has no idea about money, but he's very good at grabbing it. Oh, yes. Even when he was the quote-unquote community organizer. If there's one thing he knew what to do, be on these boards and get grants, get money, big money. And you know what? When he's criticized, he's trying it a little now. He's tried it more before. It's not working so much. That's when he goes to being black. That's when it's a racist. He holds people in contempt. We, the people, hold him in contempt. Like I said before, who'd want him in a foxhole? I said, picture him in a military. Think about it. Would you want him in a foxhole? Getting your back? Would you want him as a business partner? And what about if we have an emergency? Look at it, if he can't attend, if he's bored, if he's the can't be bothered president, what about all the real emergencies? And there are. What about them? And what if the really worst ones come that affect us? And they're coming. They're getting closer. They're getting closer. We became a country of the United States to avoid oppressors like Obama. That's why the country was founded, because of people like him. And his method of equality is, you're all going to be poor. You show me how a person who is poor has a better time of it now. You show me. And what's the purpose of the government trying to get people on food stamps as they do? Trying, as they did in some states, to get elderly people to get on government aid, and they didn't want to do it. Or advertising in Mexico. You can, how to get in and get on food stamps and so forth. Why? The revolution will not be televised. These are his people, too. Besides the slew of progressives, and boy, have they come out of the woodwork. Wearing suits, coiffed hairdos, they look like, these are not the SDSers of yesteryear with their fatigue jackets and raging voices. No, these are the smooth operators in the nooks and crannies and into the system. The revolution will not be televised. La Raza. Big on this border thing right now. La Raza, by the way, means the race. And at least in one faction of it, the motto is, for the race, everything, for everybody else, nothing. And one little video I saw of the border situation had the La Raza people with black kerchiefs around them, tough, making it that nobody could stop the kids from going through. And of course, in that group, there's a huge faction that has long been pushing to take back certain parts of the United States that were lost in the war with Mexico. So there's a real antipathy in some quarters about the United States and the land it has. And Acorn, it's still there under names, oh boy. And SEIU, the union, they all, and a lot of these protests that when and if they've happened are these people and these organizations coming out, many times getting paid to do so. Okay, this is what countries think of us now. Oh boy, you thought that George Bush rubbed people the wrong way? The U.S. is totally either outright despised, ignored, or laughed at around the world. The Saudi king called Obama virtually a fool. I don't know the exact thing, from across the world about Syria. The king never speaks out. Saudis don't speak out publicly. Egypt burned him in effigy. And the other day, Kerry had to pass through a metal detector to talk with people in Egypt, which was a big event, like look at the humiliation to the United States. Venezuela told him, mind your own business. Brazil canceled the state visit. They're so upset with the United States. Putin said, who made you a judge about Obama? Poland said the relation with the U.S. is useless, and Poland adores the United States. When we had the plan to put anti-missiles in equipment in Poland, that was all planned and going ahead, and when this guy came in for president, he changed that. And people believe because Russia didn't want it there, okay? He was all pro-Russia. Oh, what he wouldn't do for Putin. Rootin' tootin' Putin. When he made the change and he was going to install them somewhere else, he never even told Poland. They found out in the news. This is the President of the United States. Germany is our best friend in the whole, you know, the one that we work with the most. They're turning to China. She's very upset. Germany's very upset with us. Turkey, just the other day, the head of Turkey said he doesn't talk to Obama. They used to talk. He said he doesn't talk to him. Bahrain expelled our diplomat. China relations are worse than ever, etc. Qatar, which funds a lot of this extremist, Islamist, and takeover stuff in countries in Africa, the Middle East, has apparently good relations with him. Now, you might have heard of a Marine has some head injury. He served 2 times, IED exposure, you know, the blast, the whole thing. So he's a little slow when he speaks, and I've had a lot of experience with brain damage, and people don't look at me and say, yeah, we can tell, lady. But, and he's in you might have heard of this, he was going down to the border area with Mexico, and he had a couple of registered guns in his car, legal guns, and it's been shown how there's a lot of lanes and you can't get in the right one if you're in the wrong one. And while trying to turn around and be in the United States, he went through and got stuck in Mexico. They threw him in jail. He's been there for a couple of months at least. They beat him up. They deprived him of food. They had him in chains that were bleeding his ankles and wrists and so forth. He's still there. You know, it just goes on forever. And Biden's been personally spoken to about it. Congressmen have gone there. Vedder Grand Sustern has done a lot about it. A petition, the White House has a thing. If 100,000 people sign a petition, they have to answer. More than 100,000 signed for them to pay attention. Nothing's been done to get our Marine out of the jail.
This is part 6 of a multi-part series on psychiatric issues, anti-freedom communistic policy, and destructivism of President 44. We enter a lecture in progress. Dr. Mrozek is talking about the release of 5 of the highest level security terrorist threats in exchange for Army soldier deserter Bo Bergdahl.
And when those terrorists were released, those 5 that the Pentagon said are part of the 48 that must never be released, and the guy, the soldier, who was accused of being a deserter, who badmouthed the army, who badmouthed his comrades, who badmouthed the mission, who said he wished, you know, he wanted to go see the Taliban. And the guys who were with him that I saw speak on TV that they don't show anymore, they showed them brief, oh, they were so well spoken. And I said, this is the U.S. military? Whoa, I already thought it was really fantastic, even though I don't like things about war, and I've been against every war we've been in recently, since Afghanistan, really, since the first Clinton thing, the bombing there. But anyway, they were so well spoken, and they made their case. Whoa, what fantastic people we have. But anyway, so this guy who they swear is a deserter and wants to see him court-martialed, and it looks like it's never going to be done. Okay? And I don't know that they looked deeply enough to tell who they were freeing. And they might have given money besides the terrorists. Can you imagine? Anyway, his father spoke Pashto and had the beard, you probably saw it, and the president, not knowing the backlash, brought the father up to the podium at the White House, you know, and all the Dems were saying, the pundits, oh boy, you know, he made a mistake, he shouldn't have done that one, you know, I mean, so maybe he didn't know what the background of this, which he should have. There's a lot of things he doesn't know. You know, like all the time things are brought up, he said he didn't know. Yeah. But anyway, so it looks like the guy's going to right now, looks like he might not be in for a trial, which he definitely should be in for. So anyway, this father who speaks Pashtun, which is the language of many of the Afghanis, and they're a big section, the biggest part of them are Pashtun. A lovely people, I might add. I knew them before all these wars. Who knows what wars do to you? You know, we know. Yeah, so I don't know now. But anyway, he has him up at the podium, the parents, right? And the guy speaks in Pashtun, and he was also in on security briefings about this whole exchange, giving over. And he was, what is the father of this guy doing in on security briefings? And then he speaks in Pashtun and he says, in the name of Allah, the merciful, the compassionate. Is that not a message? And I can't get into it now, but I do believe or suspect that at times Barack Obama sends messages in certain ways. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? And by the way, the ones who were closest to him, lived with him every day and knew him, have not been questioned yet, never got questioned. And, you know, the Tea Parties, whose applications with the IRS were politically handled and asked all these most awful private questions and, you know, delayed and blah, blah, blah. And they had, some people had the ATF, the OSHA, the IRS, the many EPA that had all come down multiple times on them after they filed these applications. Okay? But the Tea Party people in question who got this horrible treatment from the government and the IRS have never been questioned yet in this whole IRS quote scandal. The name of the Afghan CIA intelligence head went through many channels to be, you know, what papers were going to be made public. I think when Obama visited there briefly not long ago in Afghanistan. And it has to filter through many people, have to see what's on there. And in the end, nonetheless, it became public who the head intelligence person for the CIA was in Afghanistan was made public. Does that happen by accident, ladies and gentlemen? And there have been other instances like that. The Chinook that went down suspiciously, where the plan for the guys was changed at the last moment and many SEALs died. And usually they never put that many on one plane even, so that, you know, should there be an accident, they don't all go, etc., etc. Look it up. Benghazi. Oh, boy, that's a terrible thing. Don't let people tell you. It's shocking to know, in some, which we can't get into here, that when the U.S. mission and its people are under siege, fire attack, mortar, rockets attack, for 8 hours, live video to the State Department, no one lifts a finger to help them. And when the military people who find out about it at the lower levels try to go and do it, they're being prevented from going to help. The military expansion in Africa and the case for the Muslim situation, check it out. The Syrian rebels that he supported, many of whom were Al-Qaeda. Libya. How about Libya? Nobody brings that up. What is to talk about logic and common sense? What did he do that for? Now it's a pure basket case. Horrible place. It wasn't that good before, but it was stable. What was that all about, loosening up the borders like he did? And guess what? I've read that Gaddafi wanted to surrender in the worst way, but wasn't allowed to. You know, what's going on here? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Fast and Furious, the guns flowing into Latin America on purpose. You know that clunkers program we had in the beginning? Those cars, when that program was finished, were the cost per car was something like $25,000 to $45,000 per car. It cost us through that program. I've forgotten what it's unbelievable. The DREAM Act that he said, if you're young, below a certain age, you come here, you know, you're here, you're going to get to stay. How about when he became president, he walked into Langley, headquarters of the CIA, and told them, Mr. Big, oh, you've been doing things wrong, but we're going to oh my goodness. Where's your respect? You want us to respect you? Sure, the CIA did bad things. Hey, the CIA has done a lot of good things. And you know, when he put the sanctions on Russia to hurt their economy and their oligarchs, he convened with hedge and mutual funds to let them know what he was doing. All right. That's what I'm going to say about the person who is President of the United States. God, help us all. God plays no role in this. Many times he has stated things from the Declaration of Independence, purposely omitting the word God. Religion is not his thing. He's much more, it seems, on the secular side and perhaps sentimental towards the Muslim religion. God is not his thing. In communism, I've told you before, communism is the religion. You can't have competing religions. Why do you think China persecutes religions as it has? And Russia used to. Now they have it back since Glasnost, but... All right. I have a few parting statements. One is the war on women. What war, ladies? You never had it so good. You got to get some sense. Do you really need to have babies? You've got to think about that. Do you really need to have sex with everybody? You've got to think about that. Can you be who you are? Can you be proud of who you are? And men similarly, proud of who you are. And start from wherever you are and work your hardest and be the best you can with what you are at this point in time. What war on women? Give me a break. And know that you always are susceptible to pregnancy if you're childbearing age. And if you don't want to be pregnant, please take precautions rather than get an abortion. About conservation and all this energy talk. And by the way, Dr. Patrick Moore, who founded Greenpeace, wrote an article where he talks about President Obama seems to say it's sufficient to say the science is settled, which he does. And he says it is a hollow statement with no content. And he explains, if you want to go check it out, why saying that, you know, we have to put certain measures in because of carbon is totally fallacious, that it's not the picture of what is making. Certainly, it's us causing problems. How about just the airplanes every day doing what they do to the environment and the pollution they cause, etc. But it's hardly possible to really ferret out which variables are doing what. It's way too complex, and carbon is nowhere near the enemy that people think that it is. And we should be, he points out, we should be growing more trees. Amen. Trees help us breathe. Trees give us life. They take in the carbon and give out the oxygen. They help us when the sun is 120 degrees above us in temperature and beating down on us. Conservation, that we don't take bags, that everything isn't packaged first in some paper, then in a box, then in some plastic over the box, then in a plastic bag, then in a double plastic bag. Conservation, where buildings are built so that you don't need AC, where you have automatic cross ventilations to a great degree, etc., etc., etc. Conservation of the earth. We've got the stuff coming. We've got drought where we had some delays and vacancies in kinds of vegetables and fruit earlier in this year due to what's going on with drought. Bees dying, bats dying, very necessary to our food survival. You take for granted. Oh, you think you have cool when you want cool, heat when you want heat, a burger when you want a burger, a candy bar when you... Oh, boy. I think we all ought to take a trip to other countries that if they got a little bit of rice in the day and nothing else, no clothes, no house, no shoes, no pens, no pencils, no paper. Oh, boy. We've got it too good. And we're bringing up our kids having it too good. Which brings me to the fact that with our children, we should practice delay of gratification. This is important for making us properly socialized creatures that have to live and get along with each other. It's very good to have to get trained or, to be shown how you do things first and get the stuff that's pleasurable later. You do the hard stuff and you maintain a certain amount of discipline. Not just, I want that and I want that. I love to see in grocery stores where parents know how to tell the kids and it works. No. Because right away they say, oh, I saw someone in the dollar store and the kids were with them and right away they said, Dad, can we each have something for $1? And it would be nice to say, that could be, it was 5 kids maybe, $5. And who has the money? Like a guy was telling me the other day. He went to the beach with his 2 stepchildren, and he was thinking how it cost him to park, it cost him for gas, he was saying he could barely afford it. So these things are real, and it's very good to say to the children, but you can't start at age 4 after you've been doing nothing about it from day 1. You've got to say, no, not today, maybe some other time, but it's got to start from the beginning. You've got to be in sync with your child from the beginning, not long distance, like, get over here. No, no, no. Delay of gratification. That's how you become a more noble human being. And not have children. Think about that. Come on. Think about what it's really about to have children, rich or poor. It's about throw up and feces and urine and bathing and regurgitation and waking up in the night and not being able to go out. And money. And then what? Put them in a daycare? Don't get me wrong. There are situations where a person falls into a circumstance unplanned where a daycare is necessary. But on purpose? And the children, what to do? Get your children into farming, organic farming. This is where it's going to be. People that know how to understand the earth, get them near animals. There's a group called the National Young Farmers Coalition. National Young Farmers Coalition. There's an outlet. Get your child into coding. There are many things you can do in life now that don't require formal education. But get your child being educated, reading, investigating, not just having a candy bar, doing a whatever, hanging around. No. You've got to show. I'm not saying dictate. You've got to show the way. It's called guidance. What lucky children who have parents to guide them. Even one. Animals. Get animals from a shelter. People have gone crazy with animals. The Pope, I'm not a fan either way of him, but he did say the other day, people don't use pets as children, which they are. They dress them, oh my goodness, they fawn over everything they say or do. I love animals myself, so I love to see them. But we are going overboard with that. But anyway, if you must get an animal, please get one from a shelter. I think it's awful to have people breed puppies to make them, breed other puppies and have a certain sort of... Get them from a shelter. And I'll remind you that animals are suffering in the laboratory as we speak. Crimes things that you would fall down. You would say, no, I can't, don't tell me anymore. You couldn't sleep. The horrors would leave you in nightmares. No, it's not noble to be using animals for research. It's immoral. Immoral. So don't forget the animals. And the animals getting shot from planes to cull them, getting shot for their ivory in Africa with the babies laying near the mothers crying. A couple of animal stories to leave you with. One is an elephant was taken out of chains he had to wear for 50 years of his life. I don't know what country it was, maybe India, I'm not sure. Some rescuers came and got the chains off, and the elephant had tears rolling down his face. A cat, you saw the video. A dog came charging towards a baby that was in the cat's family. That cat came running and chased that, gave it to the dog. A cat that saw that a fire was happening just the other day got out of the house and went and was knocking on the neighbor's window and irritating the dog. And a cat that usually they thought was kind of, what people think of cats, kind of like just away from everybody and detached. Birds that I saw the other day, 2 robins on a median while I'm in my car parked at a light. And one robin had a worm, wiggling from its mouth, and it gave it to the mouth of the other full-grown robin. And a pit bull that was found on the street, I guess, with carrying a small dog, and every now and then he'd put the dog down and lick his eye because it had an infection, and he was carrying that small dog around. Animals. Don't forget the animals. They're nobler. We've got to get to be as good as animals. Finally, I'll leave you with the words of Mr. Stevie Wonder. We all know sometimes life's hates and troubles can make you wish you were born in another time and space. But you can bet your lifetime's that and twice its double, that God knew exactly where He wanted you to be placed. So make sure when you say you're in it but not of it, you're not helping to make this earth a place called hell. Change your words into truth, and then change that truth into love. And maybe our children's grandchildren and their grandchildren will tell, oh, I'll be loving you always. Thank you. God bless America. Black, white, yellow. We're getting it on. It's getting better. Let's do it. Thank you.
This has been part 6 of a multi-part series on psychiatric issues, anti-freedom communistic policy, and destructivism of President 44. Thank you for tuning in. See you again.